Today, we will talk about the geopolitical events that has been taking place in North Korea, including the one in Bhutan. But first off, let's start with the one in North Korea. North Korea has constantly been threatening America with nuke attacks, that they will develop rockets that will be able to launch nuclear bombs onto American soil. And in recent tests they have been quite successful, and it has been really threatening for America, and they have been scaring their neighbors to death. And this has been an ongoing process for a long time. Kim Jong-un recently made also a threat to America directly, including an area they would attack. American President Donald Trump did not take this too lightly. He replied to the North Koreans,
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. He has been very threatening beyond a normal statement. And as I said, they will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before. Thank you.
But this developing situation has left a lot of people anxious either to resolve this peacefully in some form of way, diplomatic, and some others want just to go in there and solve this problem once and for all before it would develop any further. Imagine if you let North Korea work another 15 years alone, and all of a sudden they will be capable of launching nukes onto American soil. And perhaps by going into North Korea, you could also end the suffering of the people, as well remove a mentally unfit leader, or simply just one very aggressive one. No matter how you see it, some other people would rather have a peaceful solution. For example, invite him over to the White House. Who knows, perhaps they should set up a peace conference in Beijing or something, a close ally to the North Koreans, and perhaps a power that Donald Trump would dare and visit. And it would be on neutral ground, rather than having Kim Jong-un go into America, or the President of America go into North Korea, which I don't think either would want. So perhaps discussion on neutral ground would be more prudent. But the question is, who would benefit in a war in North Korea? Also, in the past, Russia have moved troops to their borders near North Korea, and believe it or not, Russia is that big. They are just northeast of shore of North Korea, geopolitically, and China is north to the west, and of course South Korea is south of North Korea, which is in the name, and Tokyo, Japan and everything, that entire island is just east of North Korea. So everyone is tense at their borders and American at their allies, and are pointing their guns towards North Korea. Of course, North Korea and China is sort of buddies because they're communists. And Russia is there because they got their interests, of course, in all of this. But they have urged America for a diplomatic solution. And as recent events have transpired, both Russia and China have backed down if something would happen. But it sounds, with the tone that Donald Trump spoke, either he's finally taking a strong stance for America, something that Obama could have done in his 8 years of presidency to calm the situation down. But instead, North Korea has grown with their egomaniac approach. But who knows, perhaps every time you're gonna make a threat to North Korea or something like that, make a poke on their ribs and tell them, hey, we don't want you to do this, we're gonna sanction you. They just seem to get more and more fierce. But when you listen to all this, you just think, oh, North Korea, they're just bad guys. No, they're keeping their own people as hostage. Sure, they can blow up South Korea pretty fast and have weapons pointed at them, and as well as Japan. But they're holding their own people as hostage. It's communism. A huge amount of their own population is in prison camps. They have like 8 huge internment camps for their own people. And they literally have armies on their beaches standing with, of course, pretty dangerous weapons, but as you probably know, modern warfare is quite heavily fought with bombs and just fly over airstrike attacks. They would just get bombed to bits, just drop one Moab or mother of all bombs and they would just go kablooey! They would all just blow up and die. So basically, they hold their own people hostage because the cost of this war would be so enormous. I don't think necessarily to the South Koreans or the Japanese or Chinese, Russians or Americans. I think that North Koreans would suffer an enormous amount of damage, especially if Americans would resort to nuclear weapons, which I really would hope they would not resort to. But considering if North Korea has nuclear weapons, which some people have disputed, but experts and such says that they do have nuclear capabilities, then perhaps a tactical nuke, not on a civilian city, because I think that would be outrageous, but on military targets, military installations, where they would keep such weaponry to disable them. As you probably know, nuclear weapons release EMP charges, electromagnetic pulses, which would disable electric systems, hopefully including their missile capabilities and rockets, aircrafts, etc. If you ask my opinion of the entire situation, I'm sort of on both sides of this. I see both a plus by going into North Korea, taking out the crazed leadership that is there and trying to give some sort of freedom to its people, because they're literally being in a dystopic 1984 world in there. It's despicable to see and hear what happens to these people. I will go into details of the things I've heard of North Korea in some other video, but for the geopolitical sake, let's stick to the geopolitical things. And just end the war that never ended. The fact that the North Korean war never ended. It's still ongoing. They never resolved it. It was no, happy ending to the war. There was no ending to the war. So technically, they're still at war. But they basically just, brush it off their shoulders and was gonna be like, yeah, let's be chill about this before we do anything rash, right? Let's take care of that some other day, mañana. But of course, this is a serious situation. But I'm also on the way of peace. I would like to see diplomatic solutions. I would like to see them winning this in some form of diplomatic way that would not have to result in thousands and thousands and thousands of people's deaths. And people might say, yeah, but I think that the Korean people will revolt, etc. No, I don't think they can revolt, because they're brainwashed, literally. They think that these Americans are some long-faced, military-dressed, kind of what the military looks like, but with big heads and big noses and stuff like that. They think that people stink. They think that they're basically as evil and gonna come and take their children away, and something, like some ghost story. So they're not gonna be able to fight from within the country, especially when they have a huge amount of their population. I heard that they have about a third amount of their population, but I don't believe that, because I don't think North Korea doesn't really share those kinds of information with the UN, etc. They are their own nation and people should listen to what they have to say, basically. But I do think, even though that Kim Jong-un would have this long-range missile capability, I don't think it's a good enough reason to invade his country, because they're a sovereign nation. They're able to develop their defensive capabilities and offensive capabilities as they please. It's a different story how they use them. But it's called a preemptive strike, basically, if he's gonna be continuously threatening them and developing the missiles. I have a full understanding why Donald Trump would make a decision to go into North Korea, because He's openly saying, I'm gonna launch missiles, I'm gonna blow up South Korea and Japan, and China is backing me up. You know, when someone is going on crazy rants like this, he should be looked at very seriously. It's a matter of national security. You can't just let something like this slip under the rug. And hopefully the Chinese and the Russians will do as they have said and stay back. But of course the time of negotiation might be over, because it doesn't seem like Kim Jong-un are on negotiable terms. I mean, it's provocable that NATO etc. are stationed at their borders along with the South Koreans, sort of taunting, mocking him on his high horse position. But moving on from this, we have to the west of this place, which would be this for you, right? We have Bhutan. Chinese and India have been in a clash, and both China and India are capable of nuclear powers. However, China is far more well equipped to be in a war, and in basically every single level of the Chinese infrastructure are superior to the Indian. Even the population, which China is mostly known for, and India is also known for its huge population, so they win in basically every single aspect except freedom, I guess. But the thing is, China in Bhutan is building a road basically, and they're coming into Bhutan, which is an independent kingdom. But China recognizes that Bhutan is part of their communistic nation, so by all means they can come in and work there. India was invited to, come and try and help ease the tension of this situation, so they come, of course, to their borders, and they have quite the narrow borders there because of history with the British people, as you probably remember. And the real interest of this place is military strategic point, because this is basically the one and most important point to hold off Chinese troops for the Indians. And of course for the Chinese it would be an easy way to mount an offensive against the Indians, and for any other countries in that region for that matter. But basically no country want to inflate this situation any further. The standoff is there, but they're not shooting anyone, hopefully, and this has been ongoing since June. And one can only hope that Bhutan doesn't have to be in the middle of all of this. But it seems that China is in a more powerful position than India, and basically tells India to back off with their troops because they won't back off. And the Indian, they really don't want to back off because they have an upcoming election, and if he's gonna back up, it might make the president of India weak. And as you probably know, looking strong in politics is important, as Roger Stone would tell about the Donald Trump election. Oh wait, he's over here. And the Chinese are having their 19th discussion of communistic party discussion stuff, communist stuff, not really democracy, so yeah. Whoever is best for the party, another Orwellian state. But as you well know, China is basically the biggest trade partner in the world, so they're not gonna fall like any Venezuela anytime soon, because they are full of riches in their countries. For example, metallics that we use in our cell phones, microchips, etc. And computer parts made in China. Made in China. What is not made in China, you might ask? And also they have made trade deals with the Pakistanis, which you probably know is that they used to be part of India once in the time. Yes, they split horribly after the British left India, and then the Muslims and the Hindus started to fight. So they have to give Pakistan as a peace treaty, and of course the Indians are sort of mad with these people because Muslim terror etc. is a big problem in India. And you can imagine that India, after this horrible split, would not be so pleased to hear that China, one of their mortal enemies, are gonna trade with the Pakistanis, which is also another mortal enemy, and they have their borders next to one another, and that's quite a huge thing for geopolitics, right? To secure your borders for your neighbors, especially if you and your neighbors are not getting along very well. And also a fact I wanted to note before I end this is that terrorism in India exists from the Muslims, or Islamic terror, whatever you wish to call it, Mohammedans. They used Google Maps in India to make this terror attack. And India decided to block Google Maps because, well, obviously it's quite a handy tool to learn the streets and, you know, plot your terror attack, etc. So it's quite a nice thing, but there you go. And of course, Bhutan isn't very that much mapped on Google Maps. However, my thoughts on this situation, I think it will calm down, but I don't think the Chinese does feel too threatened of this. I think it's more the Indians that are feeling threatened by this, and of course the Bhutan people, they are basically helpless in this situation, and they would really like the help of the Indian people. But the only upside I can see for the Indian people is that the North Korean situation, because that situation is next to China. So they might want to be attentive to that. But nonetheless, Russia is also angry because America sanctions, I think they even sanctioned China and Russia. So, you know, Russians are not happy as well with all this sanctioning when they really was hoping for Trump to do something better for them, which I talk more about in a different video. So what's your thought of all of this? Will this just blow over like most news, or will this escalate way much further than they have described? Or can we hope that they will finally find a solution peacefully through negotiations that will end the Korean War and hopefully lead for a better future? Or is that too naive and hopeful? What's your thoughts? But in the meanwhile, this is where I get off.